Lately we've been testing a lot of the current crop of hot hatches, cars such as the new Golf GTI Club Sport, the frantic Mini JCW GP, the fetid Toyota GR Yaris and the front-wheel drive BMW 128 Ti. So I thought we should have a quick catch up with one of the benchmarks of the genre, the Renault Sport Megane, because although we've tested this in the past, it's had a bit of a refresh.
This is the Megane RS 300, so it's now up to 296 brake horsepower, up from 280 PS to 300 PS, and at 310 pounds-foot of torque, which is actually an even bigger uplift than before. And although it might not look particularly new these days, it's actually well worth considering this. I feel like all of these cars are sort of basically what to buy if you don't like the look of the Civic Type R, because that undoubtedly is the best car to drive in the class, but, well, those looks.
By comparison, the Megane is something of a shrinking varlet. Yes, the front has some bold elements with the enormous Renault badge and the jazzy fog lights, but in true Renault Sport fashion, the aero at the rear is focused on a big diffuser rather than more obvious protrusions from the roof. Overall, I think it has a certain muscular presence without being overtly attention-grabbing.
Because this has got the normal sport chassis rather than the cup chassis, it's actually, the ride is pretty good every day. It's obviously busy. It's what you'd expect for a hot hatch, but it deals really nicely with UK roads. My criticism of the cup chassis before was that it was just too busy, too stiff, and this rectifies that. It does come with its downsides, but we'll get onto those in a minute. Elsewhere, when you're driving around normally, it's, well, pretty ordinary, fairly dull, what you'd want from a standard hatchback, to be honest. Perhaps the biggest downside to the Megane is, well, the interior. It's not terrible, but it's definitely a step down from others in the class, things like the Golf or the new BMW 128 Ti, which just have that sort of bit more premium feel to them. There's stuff in here that, well, the plastics can feel a bit scratchy, sort of certainly some stuff over here, or this gear selector just feels very thin, to be honest. The infotainment, again, the screen, it looks quite nice in this big portrait format here, but it's not the most responsive. But what about the important bits for a hot hatch? Well, that happens when you press the RS drive down here, and that brings up sport or even race. In sport or race, the whole character of the car changes. You can't buy this with a manual anymore. I think it's something to do with basically the taxation system in France, and actually it was just ludicrous the difference it made having it as a manual, so nobody was buying it, so they've cancelled that. So you only get this flappy paddle gearbox in here, which isn't bad. It's not the most responsive initially to the paddles, but it's smooth enough when it's in ordinary mode, and then when you go into sport or race, actually it's quite exciting in a way.
It's a dual clutch 6-speed item, and it helps the Megane go from 0 to 62 miles an hour in a brisk 5.7 seconds. Perhaps the biggest irritation with the gearbox is the paddles themselves, as they don't extend low enough for my liking, particularly given that they're fixed in place. Bentley used to do the same. Nothing wrong with the actual shifts they deliver though.
In the lower gears, the shifts really do thump through, and it does sound good, this 1.8 litre turbocharged 4-cylinder. You get lots of pops and crackles on the overrun. And it's a really aggressive engine. It's demonstrably turbocharged, so it's not that linear at all. And one of the big things with this is it doesn't have the linen slip diff of the cup chassis. And that, well, it can make it feel a little bit scrappy. It's not as much of a problem as you might think. And actually what I've done, one of the things I've always liked about RSs is that you can go in and you can change the throttle map of this. So in race or sport, it peaks a little earlier in the way the throttle comes in, but if you come down to regular, actually you get a more linear way of sort of progressive throttle, and that just actually helps with the torque delivery through the front wheels. So that's what I've had it in. This hot hatch's party piece is obviously rear wheel steer. I can't think of another front wheel drive hot hatch that has it. And it just imbues this car with a level of agility that, well, lifts it, I think, above a Club Sport GTI for sheer turning, pile into a corner and either trail brake or lift off midway through. And it really is super agile, super adjustable. I've actually really enjoyed this Megane RS 300. It's not a very linear car. because it's quite ragged. It's got that sort of boosty engine, and then it hasn't got the limited slip diff, so it can sort of spin up its front wheels, feel torque stereo a bit, and the steering is quite busy, but it is fun. It's got real character. It's an interesting car to drive, and it feels quite an old school hot hatch in many ways.
At £33,500 it is on a par with a base Golf GTI, which is more polished but also a little bit duller to drive. However, it is about £1,000 cheaper than the still dynamically best-in-class Civic Type R. In other words, it's in the ballpark in terms of price, and although it might not feel that new anymore, I think it's well worth considering.
If you can make peace with having paddles and, well, frankly slightly poor interior, then you've got a proper hot hatch.
Thank you very much indeed for watching. If you enjoyed it, please do think about subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Help us reach that 1 million subscriber mark. And why not check out some of our other hot hatch reviews on the channel.